What if Grandmaster Luke Skywalker time traveled to the Jedi Council? Let's start this story in the year 30 ABY, as Grandmaster Luke Skywalker sits in his meditation chamber on Yavin 4. Here he led the Jedi Praxium, the new Jedi Order, with over 150 members, and lived with his wife, Mara Jade. She was pregnant with their son, whom he knew he would name Anakin after his father. He had achieved many things in the last 25 years of the New Republic, defeating Thrawn, fallen Jedi, a clone of himself, and the Yuzong Vong. Even after all of this, he attempted to look forward, but in this meditation, he couldn't help but think back about the past. His order had just suffered significant losses after their war with the Yuzong Vong, and in this recovery period, he couldn't help but wonder if he had missed something about the Jedi of old that allowed them to grow their order to 10,000 strong. If only he could talk to that Jedi Council and ask for any wisdom they could provide. Yoda and Obi-Wan's Force ghosts hadn't spoken to him in years, despite him asking and wishing they would provide him with their wealth of knowledge once again. Luke spent the next hour meditating on the Jedi of old, and something changed in the Force. The Force answered Luke's call, and the currents of the Force swirled around him and captured Luke from the future and sent him back in time to the beginning of the final year of the Clone War as he appeared in front of the Jedi Council. Luke suddenly sensed others in the Force and opened his eyes, expecting to see his wife return home, but instead, he was surrounded by the entirety of the Jedi Council he had just focused his meditation on. Luke thought he was in a dream. Could his meditation have transcended the physical realm? That couldn't be right. He reached out with the Force, and the 12 council members in front of him really were here, and he really was in the Jedi Temple. What could have happened? Had he connected so strongly to the richness of the cosmic force that he was actually sent back in time? He had to think quickly, as a couple of the masters stood and looked around at each other. They could no doubt sense Luke was extremely strong in the Force, a level of any master in this chamber, perhaps stronger. And Mace Windu, whom he'd read and heard a lot about, stood and demanded that Luke tell them who he was. Luke realized how this must look. Suddenly, halfway through a council meeting, a man has just appeared in front of them, out of thin air. They may even think he's Darth Sidious. He looked around the room, from master to master. Luke had read about the history of the Jedi from this time, and from who was on the council. He realized they must be in the middle of the Clone War. Luke stood tall and told them he's come to help. He tells them his name is Luke, but refrains from using his last name Skywalker. He tells them he's a Jedi like them, but not in the same sense. He was born in the deep outer rim, far from Republic space, and had to learn to train in the Force himself. Windu told him that's not possible, but Luke told them a lie, that his family were all strong in the Force, a branch of the ancient Jedi Order, and passed down knowledge of the Force between them, and have been observing the galaxy for a while now, and finally decided it's time to intervene. The council couldn't believe it. A family of ancient Jedi that still existed? They asked Luke what he wanted, and he thought hard about this. What actually was the purpose of him being in the past? What did the Force want from him? Was it to learn? To help him back in his time? No, that can't be it. There's only one reason the Force would bring Luke to the past, and that was to change it. Luke tells the council he's been watching the war from afar and can't stand by and do nothing any longer. He wants to fight alongside the Jedi and win the Clone War. The council look around at each other. They would be foolish to deny a powerful Force user like this the opportunity to help them in the war effort. Yoda tells Luke they gladly accept his help. However, Luke specifically tells them he's heard of the heroics of the 501st and wants to join that battalion. Yoda and Windu look at each other, knowing that's the squad of clones Anakin leads, but accepts Luke's offer. The key thing here is that if Luke wanted to just save the Jedi, all he had to do now is tell the council about Palpatine and go to his office. However, he wants to do more than that. He doesn't just want to save the Jedi, but also his father and family. Luke goes to join Obi-Wan, Anakin, and the 501st in their siege of Zygeria. The Jedi are standing around the command station as Luke walks in to introduce himself to them. Luke enjoyed meeting a younger Obi-Wan, remembering the time he spent with his first master. But as he looked at Anakin, he tried not to freeze. There his father was, the hero of the Clone War, the strongest Jedi ever. He shook his hand, but Anakin also momentarily froze. He hadn't met this Jedi before, and Anakin sensed he was extremely strong in the Force, stronger than most of the Council. However, Anakin felt something deeper, something he couldn't put his finger on. Luke joins the 501st, and they begin the battle. Luke stays back to coordinate the forces, as Obi-Wan and Anakin lead the troops on the front lines. Luke started his battle meditation, a Force technique used to enhance and sharpen the troops of the 501st, and Anakin and Obi-Wan felt it as well. Together they achieved a swift victory, and successfully dismantled the Zygerian slave empire. They celebrated the victory together, and Anakin thanks Luke for his help and tells him together, now that he's part of the 501st, they're going to be unstoppable. Luke joins the next few months fighting in the war alongside his father. This was a dream come true for Luke, and he was living the life he knew he always wanted. He saw his father in full glory, and got to see him as the hero of the Clone War, and close up, which only strengthened Luke's resolve, that he wanted to save his father. He got close to Anakin and Obi-Wan, their relationship forged on the battlefield. They fought many missions together, some close to defeat, and they got along really well. Over these months, Obi-Wan and Anakin began to see Luke as their brother, one of their family, and became the most famous trio in the Jedi Order and galaxy. After each battle, they would return to Coruscant, and Luke would see Anakin rushing off after each mission. And of course, he knew where he was going, to see his mother Padme. Luke followed one day, to follow Anakin to his penthouse home, where he watched from a distant speeder, as Anakin walks in, carrying food, and hugs Padme after months apart, both deeply in love. This warmed Luke's heart, but also saddened him at the prospect of what could have been. Luke knew the war was coming to an end, the date of Order 66 was coming close, and knew he would act when it did. He and Anakin were deep in the Outer Rim, and had just won their victory on a Naxos to defeat Admiral Trench. The war was coming to an end. The time to act would be soon. He got to understand what Anakin was like. He was powerful, yes, extremely, but also very emotional, and his emotions often got the better of him. But Luke came to realize that wasn't entirely his fault, but also because of the Jedi Order's distaste of emotions. Anakin hadn't been taught to understand and deal with his emotions, and rather trained to ignore them, which is definitely not something that someone who grew up as a slave until the age of 10 could do. After the victory on Anaxos, Anakin and Obi-Wan were urgently called back to Coruscant to save Palpatine, who's been abducted by the Separatists. They bring the 501st and engage General Grievous's fleet around the planet. Anakin and Obi-Wan board their single-man fighter, whilst Luke commands from the main Venator Star Destroyer to begin his battle meditation. The story plays out the same here. Anakin and Obi-Wan board Grievous's command ship, kill Dooku to save Palpatine. However, Grievous escapes. They return back to Coruscant, heroes once again. However, the time came when Anakin's nightmares of Padme started. Luke realized something was wrong when Anakin exited the council chambers with Obi-Wan. He went to greet his friend and called out to Anakin, asking how their meeting was, but instead, Anakin said it went exactly like he expected from the council, and tells Luke that they are stronger than any of them, and should be the ones leading the war effort, and stormed off. Luke turns to Obi-Wan, asking what happened, who tells Luke about how Palpatine appointed Anakin to be his representative on the Jedi Council, but they didn't make him a master, the rank Anakin wanted and thought he deserved. Luke thought about this. This was a master move from Palpatine, and knew this would turn Anakin against the Jedi, and with this, the Sith's endgame was in motion, and Luke wouldn't stand by and let it play out. Obi-Wan also told Luke about Anakin being tasked to spy on the Chancellor, which Luke found an interesting move from the Jedi. He knows Anakin is insanely loyal, and the Council asking him to spy on his mentor Palpatine, asking Anakin to betray him, and in Anakin's mind, to be disloyal was the greatest sin of all. Luke knew why Anakin turned to the dark side. His Force ghost from the future had told him about his nightmares of Padme, and knew Anakin must be going through this now. However, the next day, Luke was summoned to the council, and was told he would be going to Kashyyyk with Yoda to fight off against the Separatist invaders. Luke realized why this was happening. Palpatine recognized Luke as a good friend of Anakin, and powerful Force user, and wanted him away from Anakin and Coruscant when he executed Order 66. Luke accepted in front of the council, but as he met with Yoda in the shipyard, he told the Grand Master that he didn't think he should go on the mission. He believes in the Force, that his place is here on Coruscant, and that the end of the war is near. Yoda thinks on this, and tells Luke he trusts his judgment, but Luke also asks Yoda to keep this a secret, that he believes going to Kashyyyk is the work of the Sith and wants to keep it hidden. Yoda agrees, and won't report his disappearance. Meanwhile, Luke spent the next couple of days spying on Anakin. He watches him spend time with his wife on their balcony, and also in Palpatine's office, so-called spying on him. But Luke also snuck into the opera, and went to the veranda, one bay up from Anakin and Palpatine, and concealed his presence in the Force. Luke overheard the entire conversation, Palpatine admitting he knows everything about the Jedi, and Anakin being tasked to spy on him. But what intrigued Luke the most was the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Luke has read Plagueis' journal himself, integrated into the Book of Sith by Palpatine, his master, who could control the midichlorians to create life. However, Luke knew the truth. Plagueis hadn't learned the power over life and death. However, he was close, but knew the story was exaggerated. But Luke could feel it, Anakin's pull to the dark side, asking Palpatine if it was possible to learn Plagueis' power, with Palpatine telling Anakin, not from a Jedi. Palpatine was good, extremely good, perhaps the greatest manipulator the galaxy had ever seen, and he could sense the shift in Anakin, and Luke knew he had to act fast. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan was sent to Utapau, and Anakin was completely isolated, with only Palpatine by his side on Coruscant. Luke decided to make a trip to Anakin's home, not to meet with him, but with Padme. Padme had heard of Luke from Anakin, and invited him in. But Luke couldn't shake the awkwardness, meeting his mother for the first time. He couldn't believe it was her, and his heart was filled with love. They sat down, and Luke told Padme that he needs her help. He tells Padme that the end of the war with the Separatists is coming to an end, but that won't be the end of the fighting. That in its place, Palpatine will betray the Republic to create an empire, and he needs Anakin to do it. He tells her that Palpatine is a Sith Lord, the enemy of the Jedi, and is attempting to turn Anakin to the dark side by playing on his nightmares of her dying in childbirth. Padme was taken aback, both by the horrific future that Luke laid out, and also that Luke knew about her and Anakin's relationship. She asked Luke how he could be so sure, and he tells her he has seen the future, but it's not too late to change it. She asked Luke how, and he tells Padme that he will contact her within the next day, and she must act when the time is right, when Anakin is most conflicted, and she is the only one who can save her and their children. Padme nodded, her resolve strong, but also asked Luke what he meant by children, and Luke smiled, telling her she already knows. As Luke was leaving, he was called by Master Windu to the hangar bay, and together, they stand around the communications console as they get a report from Commander Cody that Obi-Wan has killed General Grievous. Luke asks them where Anakin is, and they tell him he's delivering news to the Chancellor that Obi-Wan has engaged Grievous in combat. Windu tells them that they can go join them and share the news that Grievous has fallen. They walk to their LAAT, Luke going to join them to do this and take back emergency powers from Palpatine. However, as they're on their way, Anakin rushes up to Luke and Windu. Windu asks Skywalker what's wrong, who reveals the truth he's just learned. Palpatine is the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Windu couldn't believe it, and Anakin tells the Master he must join them when they confront him. But Windu tells him to remain in the council chambers until they return. This enrages Anakin as the Jedi board the ship, but Luke steps down to put his hand on Anakin's shoulder and tells him not to worry. They will arrest Palpatine, and his wife and child will be safe. Anakin was left speechless and didn't know what to say. How did Luke know about his wife and child? And went to the council chambers like Windu had said. Meanwhile, Luke joins Windu, Agen Kolar, Saisi Tin and Kit Fisto to confront Palpatine, but whilst they are flying, Luke secretly sends a message to Padme, telling her the time has come. Mace Windu declares that Palpatine is under arrest, but of course, the Sith Lord would never accept that, deemed the Jedi traitors, and ignited his red blade. Palpatine jumped at them with the Sith cry, moving at super speeds to cut down Agen Kolar and Saisi Tin before anyone could act. His third strike towards Luke, who parried and thrust a blow back, and Palpatine ignited a second blade and fought off the three Jedi. He cut down Fisto with ease and faced off against Luke and Windu. Palpatine told them the entire galaxy will be his, and the Jedi Order will fall. But Luke smiles and tells Palpatine that his prized possession will never join him so long as he's alive. Meanwhile, Anakin is sitting inside the Jedi Council chambers. He's wrestling with the dragon inside of him, and he's losing. He needs the power to save Padme. He can't lose her. He cannot live without her. He has to save Palpatine from the Jedi. He has to join him, and will give himself over to the dark side. Anakin stands and goes to leave. However, as the door to the chamber opens, he sees the person's face who he's been thinking about, Padme Amidala. Padme embraces Anakin and tells him it's going to be alright. She leads him back into the room, and they embrace, looking outside the mighty window. Anakin telling her that he has to go. He has to save Palpatine. But Padme looks up at Anakin and tells him that if he joins the Sith, it will ruin him and their family. He's better than that. He's a good man, and together they will ensure that she survives. Anakin's eyes go wide. How does Padme know Palpatine is a Sith? And he asks her who told her, and she smiles, telling Anakin his good friend Luke that he knew everything and is going to help them. Meanwhile, Windu and Luke continue facing off against Palpatine, now fatigued against the two Jedi Masters. He goes to put his blade away and cast Sith lightning at the Jedi, but moments before he does this, in the gap between putting his saber away and casting lightning, Luke senses the moment and acts, sending his own lightning at Palpatine, his electrical judgment, and catches him square in the chest. Palpatine is sent flying back across the room, and before he could regather himself, Windu was on him, cutting off his hand, and they placed Palpatine under arrest. In the following hours, many things happened. The council convened to discuss what transpired, and after this, they temporarily took control of the Senate and revealed Palpatine's plans to use Order 66 and the inhibitor chips inside the clones to defeat the Jedi and take control of the galaxy for himself. Also, with Grievous's death, the war was over, and they began the process to elect a new Chancellor. Luke stood in front of the council chambers and was congratulated for his role in defeating the Sith, Windu personally saying that he doesn't believe he could have done it without him. They all bow and declare that Luke will be granted the rank of Jedi Master and a seat on this council if he wishes. Luke agrees and takes a seat. However, he knows it isn't going to be for long, as his place is not in the past. Anakin and Padme didn't see Luke in the next couple of days, and in this time, Anakin's nightmares had stopped, and with this, he believed Padme was no longer in danger. Padme entered labor and successfully gave birth to Luke and Leia, and together in the solitude of their home, they discussed what to do next. Obi-Wan joined them and discussed what to do in depth, and concluded that he was no longer needed as the chosen one. The Sith were gone, and there were nearly 10,000 Jedi left, and Anakin concluded that he was allowed to be selfish and decided to leave the Jedi Order to raise his family. Over the following days, he moved to the Naboo lake house with his family, and after a week, Luke decided to join. He kept his distance after Palpatine's capture because he didn't want to affect the decision Anakin and Padme would take and leave that up to them. He arrived at the lake house and knew he had some explaining to do. Luke, Anakin and Padme stood on the balcony as Anakin and Padme asked him how he knew about their marriage and Anakin's nightmares. Luke stretched his hands along the stone balcony to look at them both, the same fire in their eyes that's also present in his own, and told them it's because he is their son. His name as Luke is not a coincidence. However, he's from 49 years in the future. They could not believe it, and they were utter speechless as Luke follows on, telling them he's not from this time, but rather a darker one, where Palpatine's machinations came to bear fruit, and he controlled the galaxy as Emperor, and Anakin stood by his side. However, the Force sent him to the past to change events and save his father. Anakin stood quiet and realized how pivotal Padme joining him in the council chambers was. If she hadn't, he would have gone to save Palpatine and join the dark side. Anakin tells Luke to join them now on Naboo, to join their family. However, Luke looked out across the lake of Naboo, the sparkling water, the luscious terrain, and wondered what his life would have been if he was the Luke from this timeline. However, he turns and tells them his path in the Force was different. He hugs both Padme and Anakin, and his body disappeared back into the Force. Luke closed his eyes, and he felt the fist of the cosmos take him and thrust him back to the future. He expected to wake again in his meditation room on Yavin 4. However, he was on a completely different planet. Luke had been here before. This was Tython. He looked across where he was standing, an ancient Jedi monument built thousands of years ago as a symbol of their power. He feels someone powerful in the Force approach and turns to see a man walking up to him. He didn't recognize him. He wasn't someone from his Jedi Praxium. But as the man got closer, walking up towards him with a smile, he began to realize the truth. This man wasn't a normal being. This was his father, Anakin Skywalker, unburnt, unturned, the man he had just saved. Anakin tells Luke he hoped his journey was insightful as he places his finger in the center of his forehead. In an instant, Luke felt everything. The memories of Luke in this timeline washed over him, training as a Force user under his father, his sister Leia, and younger siblings as well, helping bring peace to the galaxy together, defeating the Yuzong Vong, the lost tribe of the Sith, and Abeloth together. Luke realized this was the life he had fought to save, as Anakin pulls his finger away and thanks Luke, telling him he's the only one that could have saved him. Luke asks how this is possible, that this isn't how time travel should work, but Anakin tells him the Force is its own mystical weave, and must have wanted Luke to go through his original life before rejoining theirs. His path in the Force and life is unique, and he tells his son that he, Anakin, was never the chosen one, but rather his son, Luke. Luke couldn't believe it and was lost in thought as Anakin interrupted, telling him to come, that his wife Mara and son Ben are waiting for him.
Hey everyone, really quick, for the entire month of January at Fantasy Sabers, we are giving away a free Negotiator Deluxe Saber with every order over $250. Thanks again, and I'll leave a link in the description below.